Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to a podcast amongst friends. I am Reed Chrisman,
And I'm Jonathan Goodison-Orr.
and we're going to be continuing our kind of episode zero, this time episode zero C, and finishing up the few trailers we didn't get to before the end of the year. I believe first we have No Time to Die. Is that right?
Well, actually, first we have Shang-Chi. Now, this one is coming out. This one is coming out in September. This is coming out September 3rd. I believe that's Labor Day weekend. Very excited about this one. I even mentioned it as one of my top five, just most anticipated of the year.
Yeah, you did.
Now, how are you feeling about this one? Do you know much about Shang-Chi? Do you have any kind of feelings going in?
I don't know anything about Shang-Chi. I do know a little bit about the Ten Rings.
Mm-hmm.
I know that was, at least in the comics, that was the terrorist cell that the Mandarin kind of had power over. But then, in terms of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the Mandarin ended up being just kind of, this actor Trevor, and
Trevor.
I don't know where that left kind of the fate of the Ten Rings. So I don't know who Shang-Chi is, and I don't know how this movie is going to tie in.
Yeah, well, I'm really excited for this one. Essentially, Shang-Chi, and I'm no expert myself, but from what I understand, he's essentially just Marvel's Bruce Lee, effectively. He's just a kick-ass martial arts master. I believe he really came about, or really kind of came to prominence in the 70s. Around the time that not coincidentally. Bruce Lee and those martial arts films were very, very popular. Enter the Dragon, and then into the 80s, Big Trouble in Little China, and all those films. And so he's just I'm a sucker for those old martial arts movies. I think they're really cool. I think Enter the Dragon especially is a classic for a reason. I mean that's just a really good and fun movie to watch. And it's pretty clear that they're trying to capture the essence of that in what little we know about the synopsis for this film. Not only obviously does it center on Shang-Chi, but we know, as you mentioned, that the Ten Rings will be factoring in kind of as the plot's main antagonists. And this time, one of the many things that's really exciting about it is we're going to get the real Mandarin. As you mentioned, in Iron Man 3, we were promised the Mandarin, but of course it was actually just an actor, Trevor Slattery.
And then what was his name? Darren Cross or something?
Yeah, Darren Cross was the real villain of that. No, pardon. Darren Cross was Ant-Man, I believe.
You're right.
Yeah, but I know who you're talking about. The main antagonist, the
guy with the slick back hair. Out of Miami Vice.
Exactly from Iron Man 3. And so this time it's going to be the real Mandarin. And from what we've seen, there have been, this has not been confirmed, but there have been some, set photo leaks and rumors that a big component of the plot of this film is going to center around a tournament, essentially. A tournament of champions from different corners of the Marvel Universe that's going to feature Shang-Chi. And probably orchestrated by the Ten Rings for some nefarious purpose. And of course, I mean, that is straight out of a 70s martial arts movie plot. I mean, I think that's going to be really cool. And not only that, but I mean, it's an opportunity. We know that, of course, Disney has the rights to all the X-Men properties. And so this could be an opportunity to maybe introduce some mutants into the MCU through this fighting tournament. Not necessarily any of the big named ones, but I mean, there's lots of mutants that you could pull from, off that roster to feature, including some other, just characters that we either haven't seen much of in the MCU. Maybe Batroc the Leaper could make a return, again, and et cetera. So I don't know, just the more I hear about it, the more excited I am for it. I think this is going to be really cool. I think it's going to be very different than what we've seen thus far in the MCU. And I think that's critical now because we've had 3 phases of the MCU, and the shining, and by and large they've all been very, very good, very, very good to excellent. But the real shining examples, the ones that we always point to as what makes the MCU so special are the ones that really break the mold. Your Guardians of the Galaxies, your Thor Ragnaroks, your Winter Soldiers, and so on and so forth.
The best Marvel movies are the ones that deviate from the typical Marvel.
Exactly. And
I think that's kind of what the future of the cinematic universe is, which is really exciting. It's like, this, like you said, this is going to be like a kind of a 70s martial arts film. And that they're just going to dive headfirst into that genre.
Oh, absolutely.
Like Doctor Strange 2 is going to be the first like Marvel horror film, which is going to be super exciting. And they were experimenting with sitcom genres in WandaVision, which we'll talk about in a future episode. And just, the fact that they are kind of taking more risks now is really cool, especially since every single risk is paying off.
Absolutely. And so, it's it would be easier to say more about it if we had a trailer or something that we could actually kind of point to and kind of reference. But from what little we do know so far, I'm very excited for Shang-Chi, to the point where, not having seen anything official really, I put it in my top 5 just because I think the premise has so much promise to it. So I think that's going to be really fun. And that's coming out September 3rd. So something to look forward to around Labor Day.
Yeah, I will say I'm a little hesitant about that film particularly. I mean, I'm sure my opinion will change when, like you said, we get a trailer drop. But have you seen much of any of the Marvel, like pre-Disney Plus TV shows, like that made up the
Agents
Defenders?
of Shield and you have the ABC
Luke Cage and
Netflix.
Jessica Jones, but one of them was Iron Fist. I haven't actually seen the show, but I've heard that it really didn't do well. And I don't really know the characters, but to me they seem somewhat similar. Where although Iron Fist, he does have like a superpower, he isn't just a martial artist. He is like kind of this big martial arts dude that kind of came from the East. And
but which also I should correct myself, because in the comics, Shang-Chi, and it's not really clear if this is the route they'll go with in the film. They might just keep it to strictly martial arts just to not confuse the audience. But in the comics, there have been times where Shang-Chi also has the ability to multiply himself. So there is also that.
Whoa, that could be cool.
Yeah, so that's a possibility. It's not clear whether that's what they'll go with for the movie version, but that is a power that Shang-Chi has had in the past in the comics.
I hope they give him that power, because some of those like group fights in those old martial arts films are the best.
It's true.
Choreographed fights.
Yeah.
And it's weird because oftentimes it's like, you have one hero fighting against a crowd of bad guys.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be really cool if they mixed that up and it's a crowd of the hero fighting a bad guy.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that would be really interesting. I would like to see that. I agree with you on that point. So, but yes, indeed. I've as far as the old Netflix Marvel shows go, I watched, they were really hit or miss, more misses than hits, but there were some hits in fairness, Jessica Jones season 1 was very, very good. I did enjoy that. Daredevil season 3 also excellent. Really enjoyed Daredevil season 3. I also watched The Defenders, and it was okay. Was okay. I mean, the Defenders had some problems, but it was. It kept my interest enough to at least watch all the way through. So I'll give it that.
Yeah.
Also, I never finished Luke Cage season 1, but that was okay too. Yes, no, I'm familiar with Iron Fist's reputation. It's that one was definitely considered to be a miss. I never watched it myself. But I do know that one definitely suffered from the same problems that a lot of those seasons of the Netflix series did, which is bloated, kind of meandering, just kind of light on characterization and light on not action necessarily, but exciting action.
Yeah.
It's you never really felt as though the hero was in a significant danger because they've got powers and they're fighting against a bunch of people that don't. So yeah, so I've never seen it, but I am familiar with the reputation. Um, I think the Netflix series they took a stab at it and it worked in some places, but I think that ultimately I'm glad that it's kind of now they've stepped back and Disney Plus is now taking up the mantle.
Yeah.
Because I think that what they're doing on Disney Plus now is a lot more promising than anywhere else they could have gone with taking like trying the Defenders again. I mean, it's like we kind of did that, so on to the next thing.
Speaking of, on to the next thing.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't get a better transition than that.
That's true. That's true. So I guess moving on to September 24th, Venom Let There Be Carnage.
Yes.
Now, this is the sequel to the Venom film that came out back in 2018. Did you see that? Did you see that one?
So Venom is one of those movies that I never sat down and watched, but have essentially seen the entire movie through clips on YouTube.
Yeah,
It's
no,
a
it's
very
true.
unfortunate way to consume movies, and it's a terrible habit that I hope to break. But that is the way in which I saw Venom.
And fair enough, honestly. I mean, that's no, that is bound to happen, I'm afraid, these days. Yeah, I saw Venom in the theater actually, pretty much around when it came out, and it's a paradox, because Venom definitely developed, it definitely cultivated a feeling of meh when it came out. It wasn't horrible, but it had problems. It was not like the strongest superhero or anti-hero film.
Yeah.
And I felt the same way, honestly. I enjoyed I enjoyed watching Venom once, but I never. It's one of those movies where it's like, okay, I don't regret watching it once, but I never.
That
want
was
to see it again.
fun. Never gonna see it again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's exactly like that. I didn't regret spending the 12, $13 or whatever it was to see it in the theater. I never plan to see it again. And so you would think that based on that track record, why would I have any kind of interest in the sequel if the first one, barely kept me on? But I am excited for Venom Let There Be Carnage, mainly because I think they're going in a different direction with this one. And principally what I mean is that they've gotten a new director for this one. And it's someone that I think I think we all know and love. The master of motion capture himself, Andy Serkis, is going to be directing Venom Let There Be Carnage. And I think they've also, yeah. And let me double check this. I don't know if they. Let me double check this because I don't know if they have the same writer or not. It's one of the same writers. The original Venom had 3 writers, but this only has one of the original writers. And so, I think that they saw what worked and what didn't with the Venom from a couple years ago. They want to now they have an opportunity to kind of build out the world, kind of, make us care a little bit more about Eddie Brock. And I just think, Andy Serkis, he's a really cool guy, really widely liked in Hollywood, incredibly talented, obviously, for his motion capture stuff, which is helpful when you're directing a Venom film because you've got Tom Hardy who's actually doing a lot of these stunts and things. And also, Let There Be Carnage. We're getting an iconic villain in Carnage coming in now, who's going to be a real threat to the symbiote. And so I'm really interested to see what happens. The first one was fine. but it was only just fine. But I think
Yeah.
that with this one, you're bringing in Carnage. You've got Andy Serkis directing. You saw what worked and what didn't with the last one. You changed the writing team. I think there's reason for hope there. So I'm excited about Venom. Let There Be Carnage.
So is this film planning on kind of expanding that pseudo Marvel Sony
Mm,
universe? Because I remember, there was, the Amazing Spider-Man
mhm.
was the Sony properties, and
Yeah.
they had huge plans. If it weren't for the fact that the second one kind of flopped. But even after that, and after the deal with Marvel, I think they were still planning on doing like a Sinister Six movie,
Yeah.
and they're kind of building up to that, but possibly without Spider-Man as the hero to face that. So, do you
Yeah.
think this is? Do you think they're still moving towards that, and they're going to incorporate Carnage as one of the Sinister Six? What do you
and,
think is going to happen?
and I'm so glad you brought that up because that's a very important point. Because does anybody remember Morbius from a year ago? That was another Sony Spider-Man universe film that was going to come out, centered around the
Yeah,
villain.
I saw that trailer.
Yeah, Morbius. And I'll be honest with you, I saw the trailer, was not interested at all.
I
I
saw the trailer and I just got confused because then it had, Michael Keaton's Vulture from the MCU,
exactly,
but
exactly.
it's a Sony verse film,
Exactly. And
right?
that's the thing. Yeah, no, exactly, exactly. And so I was not Jared Leto's a very talented actor. I know people give him a lot of shit because they don't like his Joker, and that's fine. You can there are fair criticisms there, but he's a very good actor. So, not just Jared Leto, but nothing in that trailer really made me excited for Morbius. But what was interesting about it, and clearly this was Sony desperately grasping to give the movie some extra relevancy, is that they did bring over Michael Keaton's Vulture from, who was obviously in the MCU set Spider-Man Homecoming. So that seemed like a pretty clear indication that Sony wants to establish some linkage between what are strictly Sony films and the Marvel produced Spider-Man films. Um, and
I'm
I think
I'm
that
just
that
I'm just
yeah.
wondering if this is going to be like it's culturally linked. Like the way I see it playing out is that Marvel is going to be like canonically those Sony films did not happen in the MCU. And then
Mhm.
Sony is going to be like canonically all the Marvel films happened in our universe. So there's going to be almost like a cultural bridge, but no legal bridge, no
Yeah.
legal connection between these films.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is that when we get to Spider-Man No Way Home, I think we're going to get into a lot of what
We'll
this
get into that. We'll save it
leakage
later.
means because there's a lot of cross-pollination happening here. And yeah, but I think to answer your question, I think that there is a very high potential that especially coming out 2 months before Spider-Man 3, we could get some further tie-ins between the Marvel universe and what is ostensibly the Sony Spider-Man Marvel universe. I think that there's a very real likelihood of that. And
Do we want that though? I think that's the big ticket item.
well, then that's the thing is that in the case of Morbius, I would say no because I already wasn't interested in the Morbius film. But in this case, I am interested. So for a kind of a self-serving way, it's like, well, yeah, if I'm already if I've already bought into it, then it wouldn't hurt to throw in some connection to the MCU, which is another thing that I already like quite a lot.
Yeah.
And Morbius, I could have done without it because I think that one's going to be, obviously movie hasn't come out, nobody's seen it, but from what I saw, I think that one's going to be a misfire. It didn't look very interesting to me. But in this case, I mean, Venom is a classic anti-hero slash villain. I mean, that's something that it would make a lot of sense that you would want some linkage between Spider-Man and Venom. So
Yeah.
I think that they could do it, and I think it could work if they're smart about it.
Yeah, I think being smart about it is definitely the key. Like my big concern is, kind of audience confusion.
Hmm.
Um, but at the same time, it's like, as much as I want to keep those two, cinematic worlds separate, I think Venom would be greatly served by Spider-Man. just because he is. I mean, he does have that anti-villain or anti-hero role, but when he's a villain, he is a villain made specifically for Spider-Man.
Yep.
Not just in like, story-wise, but also just looks. There's that iconic black Spider-Man suit, and you still have like the white eyes and the similar shape, and it's just it was weird to have a Venom movie without Spider-Man. It was almost like they had to rewrite him as a different character.
Yeah.
And I think that'll continue to work for the Carnage film. So at that point, with this new version of Venom, probably keep it separate is what I would prefer. But if we could go back in time and have that Spider-Man versus Venom, and then Spider-Man plus Venom versus Carnage.
Right. Yeah, that
would
be
amazing. Would that have been?
Yeah, that would have been really cool. And yeah, and that's the other thing as well, is that I agree with you. The cleanest way to do it would to simply have the Sony, Spider-Man universe films be their own thing. No linkage between that and the MCU. It's true. That would be the cleanest way to do it. But at the end of the day, it's all about, as they say,
about that moolah, yeah.
If it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. So,
and
yeah, there you go. And so Sony, they want to make dollars, and Spider-Man is the golden goose. And right now, Spider-Man firmly resides in the MCU.
Well,
so
Spider-Man plus just Marvel.
Exactly.
So, even if that's somewhat malicious, but they're like, hey, this is like somewhat related to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they're going to pull over a lot of those fans.
Exactly. And honestly, I think that Disney would probably prefer they be separate as well, just as you said, just to avoid audience confusion. But Sony is a stakeholder in this, and they want to keep the two as close together as possible. And so, to that extent, once you accept that Sony is going to do everything in their power to move their Spider-Man universe closer and closer and closer to the MCU, it just becomes a matter of, well, how can you do it without taking over the good parts that we want, like Venom and Carnage, but then leaving off the bad stuff, like like a number of things that they've done. Let's be honest. I don't know, Dane DeHaan's Green Goblin, and everything else we don't like. So Morbius, probably Morbius. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
So how do you keep the good bits but then leave off the rest? Because also tonally they're quite different.
That was something I want to mention. It was like Venom was, I say it was a dark movie, like emotionally, but also just visually, the way it was directed, the way it was lit, the way it was shot. It's so different from not just the MCU movies, but the Spider-Man movies, which are very bright and colorful, and they lean more on the humor and like the teen drama side of things. Because that's arguably the most important part about Spider-Man, is that he's just a kid. He has kid problems and superhero problems.
Exactly,
and that just doesn't fit with like the grizzled, poor, adult Eddie Brock that is kind of wrapped up in this, conspiracy.
Yeah, and it's a lot more violent as well, because in Venom, I mean, like, they don't mince words. I mean, Venom does eat people. I mean, it's more violent than what you would get in your average MCU film. So it's true, the tones don't exactly mesh as well. And I mean, especially, there's no doubt in my mind when it comes to Let There Be Carnage, there's gonna be violence more so. In that film. I mean, it's literally, you've got a symbiote serial killer who just goes around, he just kills everybody. So it's like that's gonna be they're very different. And but again, I'm sure Sony wants to keep all of their properties as close to the MCU as they can. So they'll. If I had to guess, I don't think, ultimately Disney doesn't have any say in what Sony does with their own films, but I think that they'll work on an agreement that says, okay, try to at least keep things on this path so that when Spider-Man does intersect, it's not a completely jarring mess, you know.
Yes. Yeah.
And so if I had to guess, that's probably what they tried to do. But honestly, I think that yeah, I mean, especially when you're talking about like not even necessarily factoring into the plot, but like the end credit scene, I think that you could definitely get some kind of tie-in to what's going on with Spider-Man in the on the MCU side of things, or another character pops over or what have you.
Yeah.
Um,
So if you could kind of blend those two universes and incorporate Spider-Man into that movie, how would you do that personally?
oh, well, that's a good question. Well, the thing is that just geographically, you know, not even talking about universe hopping or anything else, just geographically, for Spider-Man's in New York and Venom is set in San Francisco. So
Yeah.
you would need to get someone who's in Spider-Man's orbit that would also plausibly be on the West Coast, roughly around, you know, when we are in the MCU, which is 2023. Um, and I don't know. I mean, you've already got the Vulture popping up in Morbius, so we know he's off in London someplace. I think, which I don't even know how that makes sense because last time we saw him, he was in prison. But I
Yeah.
guess he got out of prison. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe the Tinkerer. You know, I don't know. Well, I don't know what happened to him after Homecoming, but you know, maybe he's there. Or oh no, you know what? J. Jonah Jameson popped up at the end of Far From Home.
Yes.
His son in the comics is the one that dies in the rocket explosion that they reference at the very beginning of Venom from a couple of years ago.
Mm.
So maybe in fact, that's probably what I would say is J. Jonah Jameson is it would be the most likely linkage between the MCU and the Venomverse because it's in the comics it is his son that dies in the rocket explosion and we saw
Yeah.
that at the beginning of Venom. So I would probably say that if I had to guess.
Yeah. The way I would do it is um I'd say you have so tonally you start a lot lighter, a lot
Hmm.
more like the kind of Spider-Man MCU films that we have.
Hmm.
And I say, we have Venom in San Francisco, and he's just kind of doing his own thing and cleaning up the town, and it's he's loved by the community and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Um, Here's rumors of another symbiote wreaking
Mm.
havoc in New York.
Hmm.
Doesn't know what's up with that, but he's the only guy with symbiote powers, so he goes down to help.
Right.
At which point, I think you then have him come into conflict with Spider-Man,
Hmm.
and you start doing this like because he's kind of an anti-hero, you can frame him somewhat in that villain role to have a little bit of conflict with Spider-Man,
Hmm.
and then eventually you get that side of it, and you get the kind of buddy cop team up of
Hmm.
Spider-Man and Venom
Yeah, that would be
against
great.
Carnage. And then you talk about how violent Venom was as a film and like he eats people. I think it would be so cool to have this upbeat like Spider-Man bright tone film, and then you meet Carnage, and then all of a sudden it just gets super dark, and there's like
Yeah.
bloodshed everywhere, and just have it kind of jarringly shift tones out of nowhere.
Hmm.
That's
No,
how I would
definitely.
do it.
That would
Because
be
I think that
awesome.
could be really interesting.
Yeah, I would love to see that. That would be an awesome way to do it. You know, just embrace the kind of the discordant tones between the two, and just kind of have it be like a mashup essentially of these two different worlds. I think that would be really fun.
Yeah, and then
Um,
you get to explore more of like, this is Peter Parker at his lowest because again, he's just a kid. He doesn't know what to
yeah,
do. But then you have Eddie Brock, who's an adult, and it's like, hey, I know things are bad, but like, you just kind of got to deal with it. And
exactly. Yeah.
you kind of get like even more danger, and it's not like, oh my God, is Spider-Man gonna rescue the glasses? It's like, oh my God, is Spider-Man gonna die?
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
Um,
No, that would be
so
awesome. I would love to see that. Oh boy.
yeah,
Oh, that's
that's
interesting.
my, if Sony executives ever in on this, and are looking for an additional writer, that's my pitch.
Yeah, well, we know they have some sense because, of course, a couple years ago, back in 2019, they were getting ready to pretty much blow up the deal with Disney. They were going to go it alone with Spider-Man, and but the fans they spoke out. They said we love this Spider-Man in the MCU. We want him to stay, and they listened. Ultimately they
Yeah,
came back to the table and they made it happen. So
thankfully, yeah.
clearly they do have at least some measure of sense. So let's hope they keep that up.
No time to die.
Exciting stuff. Exciting stuff. So right off the bat, as I've said before, I'm a big fan of the James Bond series. Do you really have much connection to it?
Um, Not too much, but I definitely have enjoyed the Daniel Craig
Hmm.
James Bond films. I remember falling off of it after Spectre,
Mm.
because this franchise has kind of had its weird issue with the really good, what was it, really good even numbered and really bad,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
really
It's kind of been
really
every
good
other.
odd numbered,
Mm.
really bad even numbered.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. It's kind of been peaks and valleys. Yeah.
yeah, and I think this lands on an even number, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, no. This is the 25th. This is the 25th film.
But what about in just the Daniel Craig? Because it was Casino
Um,
Royale was
yeah.
one.
For just Daniel Craig, this is the fifth.
Interesting. Okay.
You had Casino Royale, then Quantum of Solace, then Skyfall, then Spectre, and then this
Yeah. So this one could be really, really good
one.
if the pattern holds true. Um,
Yeah, this is really exciting for a few reasons. The first is that this will be Daniel Craig's last
last
Bond
one.
film. He's been very clear about that. A lot of people were thinking that the last one, Spectre, would be his last one. He even
Well,
said
he
that at some
announced.
point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he announced that it was going to be his last one, and then they were like, "Okay, what if we give you even more money?
Yeah,
Like $10 million if you do another one." And he was like,
exactly. They backed a Brinks trip up to his house, just to stack to the brim with dollar bills, and that seemed to do it.
"Jokes on
Um,
him! They sent 4 trucks full of nickels."
yeah, but yeah, no, he's been very clear that this is the last one, and I think it's beneficial for this movie because they knew going in that this would be his last one. Unlike
Yeah.
where if they made the last one and then he came out and said, well, I don't really want to do any more, then you're just kind of you're kind of leaving it cold turkey. But this one, they knew going in this is going to be his last one, so let's kind of bring the arc to a grand conclusion, and it's really exciting. It's really exciting.
Do you think he'll
So
die in this one?
people have been saying that. People have been speculating that that's a real possibility, and that he might even want that. He might even have asked for that because he's also a producer. So he's
Mm,
involved with the writing of the film as well.
yeah.
And there's been speculation that he might even request that they essentially kill off his Bond at the end of at the end of this film, and which wouldn't affect the franchise because obviously they reboot it with another actor anyway. So
Yeah, yeah.
but he would be the first Bond to die essentially. At the conclusion of his arc, which would be really interesting. So I think there's a very real possibility of that. This movie is coming out on October 8th, which is odd because originally it was going to be April 2020. Of course, they bumped that back to November of last year.
Yep.
And then they bumped that back to, I think they briefly had it at another date this spring, and then they bumped it back to October, where it currently is.
No, it has to be finished then, and they're
Oh
just
yeah, no,
trying to
yeah.
get that theatrical release.
Oh, definitely. This movie has been done. But I do wonder, even if I'm sure things will be fine, movie going wise by October certainly. But I do wonder why October 8th, in particular. I mean, I'm sure it's a
Not
fine
near
weekend,
any holidays, like you
but
could have
yeah,
done that Christmas release.
Yeah, that's the thing is that, Bond has traditionally been, not always, but, it's of any holiday you could release it around, usually Thanksgiving is when it would come
Yeah.
out. That's kind of been the prototypical release time frame for a Bond film. And October is so close to Thanksgiving. I mean, you may as well
Like
just put it at
what's one more
Thanksgiving.
month?
I
Yeah.
mean, honestly, I mean, you may as well. But I mean, for now, it's on October 8th, and um, it's just really exciting because you have as we were just saying, you have the conclusion of this arc, and it began, of course, with Casino Royale, and you have that connection with Felix Leiter, as you pointed out. He's back from Casino Royale. One of, and I really do mean this, Casino Royale is quite possibly my favorite action film ever
It
made. I
was
mean, it
so
is
good.
superb.
Amazing.
It is a near perfect action film.
Did he not die at the end of that one?
No, no.
How did that one? Because I remember, Bond was being like tortured in the basement, and
Mhm.
then he gets rescued. And then how did that one end? Because it's been several years.
So, it ended when he kidnapped Mr. White. Essentially, he fell in love with Eva Green, I believe. Let me see here. Let me double check this. Um, Pardon me a moment. Um, my memory. Um, Yes, Eva Green's character, Vesper Lind. Essentially, she was kind of his handler at in Montenegro at the
Yeah.
actual poker game, and they
Yeah.
fell in love. But essentially, yeah, she uh, let's see here. Yeah, so essentially she betrays him, and this was the big action sequence in Venice. Remember when the building sinks into the canal?
Mm,
Um,
mm,
she dies essentially.
yeah.
So he falls in love with her. He's going to retire. He's going to give up being a double O. But they're in Venice. He finds out that she betrayed him. And essentially, that big action scene happens, and she drowns. And the movie ends with him kidnapping Mr. White, who is the big bad of the next film, who was involved in the events of Casino Royale. The organization behind Le Chiffre.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's my very kind of haphazard explanation of the end of that film. But yeah, that's essentially how that movie ends.
Okay.
And
So then,
so, yeah.
so where is he coming back from, the villain?
Um, the villain in this one.
Yeah, that we saw in the trailer.
Oh yeah, no. This villain is a totally new villain. His name is Light Tucifer Safin. I hadn't heard the
Yeah,
first name
no, we
before,
have
but
that guy, but there was the clip of I can't remember what his name was, but in Casino Royale.
you mean Christoph Waltz character?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was from Spectre. He was the big bad in Spectre.
I thought it was he not the big bad in Casino Royale?
No, no, that was a different guy.
Oh.
You're thinking of see, I'm forgetting everybody's name today. Mads Mikkelsen. He was Le Chiffre.
Okay.
And Christoph Waltz was the other fellow from Spectre.
It's all these white men with dark hair. Like,
Yeah, Blofeld. Of course.
they all look the same.
Yeah, no, yeah. Sorry, I don't know. I was blanking on that name. Yeah, he was Blofeld in Spectre. And so, yeah, so of course, at the end of Spectre, Blofeld isn't dead. They're actually able to capture him, so that's why he can just be kind of in prison in this one.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because it sounds like Blofeld is going to help Bond take down Safin. In the trailer they talk about how, your enemy is now my enemy. And so, that's really interesting. Blofeld working with Bond to take down a mutual threat. I think that's really interesting. Because of course Blofeld is the quintessential Bond villain, like going back to the 60s. And so that could be really fun. But just overall, I mean, it's you're drawing from all these different. You've got Blofeld from Spectre, you've got Felix Leiter coming back from Casino Royale. You have Ray Fiennes back as M. He was brought in from Skyfall after Judi Dench's M died. And so, you've got all these things coming back. You've got nothing coming back from Quantum of Solace, which is good. That's the one that I don't think you're going to see any callbacks from, and that's fine. But from the three ones that are relevant to remember, you're bringing these elements back in to kind of, bring out Daniel Craig's iteration of Bond, which has been incredibly successful as these things go. It's just the trailer doesn't tell us too much, but from what we do see, it looks like it's going to be very interesting, especially, and this is the main thing. Rami Malek, who this is his first role after winning his Oscar a couple years ago for Freddie Mercury from Bohemian Rhapsody. His villain Safin is a very shadowy figure. People have been trying to figure out what his deal is because we don't really know much about it from the trailer. And there's essentially been speculation that this is Craig's last Bond film, and clearly, as we've seen, as Craig's movies have gone on, they've enjoyed taking more and more little elements and bits and pieces from the franchise's past, especially in Spectre. When you have the Spectre organization back in Blofeld, I mean that's drawing heavily from the past.
Yeah,
and they're saying that Safin could be essentially a new version of the original Bond villain, Dr. No. From Dr. No. If I pull this up here, if you come over here, Dr. Julius No, he was the main villain from Dr. No back in 1962 was when the original film came out. Yeah. And essentially what the speculation has been is that from what little we know and what little we hear about Safin, it sounds very much like Dr. No from that original film. He's an adversary of Bond, and he's a terrorist leader on a revenge mission. He really gets under Bond's skin, and he considers himself a hero almost in the same way that Bond considers himself to be a hero. And so it's that could be really interesting. Even though his obviously his character name, as far as we know, is called Safin. It could be, a smokescreen because he's actually going to be Doctor. He could be essentially a new version of Dr. No.
Yeah.
In this film, which would be really cool, really cool callback. So, ultimately, I'm really excited for it. It's definitely one of my most anticipated films of this year. We'll see if it still comes out in October or if it does end up getting pushed back to Thanksgiving. I think that would probably make more sense, but we'll see.
Yeah. So I do want to ask, given that they're doing all of these callbacks and trying to do kind of a last hurrah for Daniel Craig, do you think there's any concern that they're going to jump the shark with this one?
I think you can never dismiss that. I think that there is there's always a risk of that, and you could even argue that they did do that a little bit with Spectre because, of course, Casino Royale was, 10 out of 10, excellent. Yep. Skyfall was also very, very good.
So good.
And Spectre was good. It wasn't bad by any means. It had really high highs, but its lows were pretty low as well. And you could tell that they were really trying to, again, lean heavily on the past, bring back, stuff that, Spectre and Blofeld and all these other things, kind of more traditional Bond tropes. And you could argue that they didn't quite know how to take those things and elevate it to the same level that they elevated the enemies from Casino Royale and from Skyfall. It never really felt as personal, Inspector did with other films, which is weird to say because, of course, Blofeld, the big revelation in that movie is that Blofeld actually was raised. He was essentially Bond's, adopted brother. Essentially, they were raised together for a period of time, and despite that, it didn't feel quite as close to home as the other ones did. And so you could argue that's already happened to an extent, but it didn't spoil the film in that case. It just made it not quite as good as it could have been. And I think that is a risk here, but I think that they've got a really good team behind this one, including, I wanted to mention this. This is the first film in the entire series, 25 movies. This is the first time that they've had an American director for a James Bond film.
Oh,
Yeah, they've always been British directors, or just mainly British directors. But this one's directed by Cary Joji Fukunaga, who's done some really cool stuff. If you've seen True Detective, he did that.
Oh yeah.
And also he did this really cool little mini series on Netflix called Maniac a couple years ago. I don't know if you saw that.
I haven't, but that sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's a really cool, like, psychological sci-fi show. It's got Jonah Hill and Emma Stone. Really good. Definitely recommend it. Yeah, he's the first ever American director for a James Bond film. And yeah, it's got some really strong writers. A lot of the writers from the previous Bond films, the good ones.
Yep.
And also, oddly enough, Phoebe Waller-Bridge also came in to do some script editing. Who you may know her from Fleabag. She's the one that does that show. So that's going to be an interesting element to it as well. But yeah, I think there's a real risk of that, but I'm not too worried. I think that they've got the right talent behind this one, and I think they've got a vision for it, considering that they know that this is going to be the last one. So
yeah. Since this is obviously Daniel Craig's last James Bond film, there have been discussion on who should be the next Bond.
For years, yeah.
Yeah. And I remember one of the big contenders was Idris Elba.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any perspective on that? Particularly, obviously you're black, and this would be the first black James Bond, and is there kind of a level of representation that's important to you, or does it not matter because it's a fictional character? Like,
I think it's a really interesting question. And I mean, as for myself, me personally, I would like to see that. I don't think it's critical that you have that. I mean, ultimately, I think that if you wanted to go for someone like Idris Elba, yes, obviously the fact that he is black is that raises eyebrows, because it is different. You wouldn't have the the next debonair white guy take over. So that would be interesting, but I don't think it's essential. I think if you get Idris Elba, you get Idris Elba because Idris Elba is just an amazing actor. And I mean, there's been kind of a shadow campaign for years for him to be the next one in line. And I think that would be fascinating to see. I think Idris Elba or someone else of that caliber would be a fantastic choice. The only thing is that Daniel Craig, Casino Royale came out in 2006. It's now 2021, so he's had a 15-year tenure as Bond, one of the longest.
Yeah, that is true.
And Idris Elba, I mean, I don't know how. Let me see how old he is, because let me see this, because he is see, he's 48. Okay, so he's only 48. So, but even so, you probably wouldn't get a 15-year tenure out of Idris Elba. You
Yeah.
might not get 5 movies with him, but a trilogy would be cool. I think you could probably do that. I mean, the first 3 Craig films came out in 6 years. All in. So, I could see that. And so it would
Yeah,
be.
the only issue is you also have to factor in like, the number of years you wait before producing a new James Bond film.
Well, exactly. Yeah, that's the other thing. Is so I think that, and I think that there's a lot of people that could make a really compelling case for why they ought to get a shot as the next Bond. Obviously, it's one of those coveted jobs, especially if you're a British actor. It's one of those
Yeah.
coveted jobs you can get in the movies. But I think Idris Elba would be an excellent choice. He would be a little bit on the older side. But then again, I mean, Sean Connery was older, at that point when he was doing Bond, and Roger Moore was doing it for a long time. So that's not even a disqualification. And I think he's got a magnetism to him that you don't
He's
really get.
so suave.
I mean, really. I mean, that's the thing is that you get both sides. He's just got that kind of, he's just got that power about him, that magnetism, which is great in the fight scenes. But also, he's very suave, very debonair. He also has that side of it. Really, as a real strong point as well. So I would like to see it. I think that he's not like he's the only choice, but I think that if they made that choice, I would be more than happy with it because I think that would be fascinating.
So who do you think would be your top choice?
I mean, that is so hard to say. That is so hard to say.
It also requires an immense knowledge of British actors.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's the thing is that there's so many people that that could credibly make the case. I mean, there was even talk at one point about Tom Hiddleston being someone that could be a good Bond. And honestly, I don't disagree with that. I mean, he's a very charming guy. So, I mean, there's a lot of people that could make an argument. I think there's a lot of people that could make the argument, but I would say that in terms of who's in the lead, in terms of lobbying for them to get the job, and has been the most associated in the press with the next to get the job, it would be Idris Elba. He's gotten the most chatter by far of who could make the best case for being the next one. But there's lots of people that could do it. Even Renee Jean Page from Bridgerton. I don't know if you heard about this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The breakout star from Bridgerton. There's been a lot of talk about him lately being the next Bond. Which I mean, sure, why not? I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, he's definitely
he just straight up left. So like, why?
Yeah, I mean, really. I mean, it's like. I mean, I'll grant him this. I mean, from what I haven't seen Bridgerton, but I hear he's very good in it, and obviously very good-looking guy. So he's, check that off.
Yeah.
Seems pretty suave. So why not? I mean, there's lots of people that you could make an argument for. But I think Idris Elba would be fascinating. I mean, that would definitely be a different Bond. And I think having a Bond who isn't white, I think that would be interesting. I don't think it's a requirement, but if ever there was a time for it, I mean, James Bond has been around since, for almost, coming up on 60 years now. So wouldn't be the worst idea to give somebody else a shot. And, if you are going to do that, you definitely would be doing yourself a big favor by getting someone of the caliber of an Idris Elba, because not only is that somebody who's not just a white guy, but it's also somebody who has enormous credibility in terms of just being one of the top actors in the industry.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Very cool.
Yes, indeed. So just a quick pause for a moment. I'm just gonna turn on my fan. So yes. Moving on to our next Marvel film. I know it feels like we just exited our last one, but now we're going into the next one. And this one, once again, we're breaking the mold. I think this one's really going to break the mold. We are moving on to November 5th, The Eternals. Oh boy, this movie is going to be fun.
I am so curious. I've been very curious because here's the thing is that the MCU has done such a good job of, you know, introducing us to new characters by keeping them grounded.
Mm-hmm.
The entire foundation of the MCU started on, the one character with no superpowers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like already, yeah, this is very plausible. It's set in a modern setting. Like we can see this happening. And then when they introduced Thor, who was like the alien, even then they still framed it as science.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's like, we've been branching out a lot. And like when Doctor Strange was first introduced, there was a lot of concern that, that movie wasn't going to take off at all because, it's kind of deviating from the grounded path. And obviously it did really well.
Yeah.
And then, you look at like Guardians of the Galaxy, Thor Ragnarok, kind of, there's a lot of out there stuff. But for me, it's like, there's out there, and then there's Lovecraftian cosmic, no possibility of being grounded in any earthly matter whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah, and
So
that's
I'm really curious as to how they're gonna handle that.
Yeah, no, I know that's exactly it. I mean, the Eternals is going to be I am utterly convinced quite unlike anything we've seen before because as you said, I mean, the concepts, and I don't really know much about the Eternals, in the comics or anywhere else. I know a little bit about them. I see the synopsis here. They are just the short premise statement is after an unexpected tragedy following the events of Avengers Endgame, the Eternals, an immortal alien race created by the Celestials who have secretly lived on Earth for over 7,000 years, reunite to protect humanity from their evil counterparts, the Deviants. So that's just the kind of the quick synopsis of it. Yeah. But from what little I do know about the Eternals and the Deviants and the Celestials, I mean, this is all very out there stuff. As you were saying, you can't
like it
really
doesn't get much more out there.
Yeah, it's very much big picture sci-fi weirdness, just craziness. And yeah, you can't rationalize it. There's not going to be much grounded about the Eternals, I'm convinced, other than the fact that despite dealing with all of this, all this celestial stuff and, all of these, kind of more galaxy level phenomenon, this movie is going to be set on Earth. I mean, these characters, live on Earth, which I think is going to be very interesting. I mean, first of all, here's the first thing we have to kind of overcome, which is everything in the MCU has happened, right? Yes. And they have been there the entire time,
So you then have to place them like were they just ignoring all of
for 7,000 years, mind you? Yeah.
Yeah. And also, isn't the entire like the movie is going to introduce these characters? Wasn't there some talk that like the movie itself is going to take place over 7,000 years and like their entire time on Earth?
Yeah, I heard that as well. That it's pretty much going to be an overview of what they've been doing throughout history.
Do that from a narrative sense. Like, how do you have a story that takes 7,000 years and condense all of that into 2 hours? Like,
yeah, and that's the thing is that it's gonna be weird. We know so little about this movie, but other than that short little premise statement. But it's going to be weird. I heard the same thing where it's going to be essentially, obviously some parts of it will take place after Endgame, so we'll get some stuff in the present day, but also a lot of it's going to be just what the Eternals have been doing for those 7,000 years. I've heard they're going to be diving into different time periods and like, ancient Egypt and all this different kind of stuff, just where they've been for all this time. And it's going to be this massive, epic, sci-fi saga. The Celestials, that's going to be really interesting. Of course, we've already seen one Celestial in the MCU with Ego from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. that dude was literally a planet. So
Well, there was that dude. Um, wasn't the Grand Master and the Collector? Weren't they also Celestials?
I believe so. I believe so. And so yeah, we've seen a few of them.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's the power level that we're kind of operating at here. And again, it's set on Earth, so that's going to be really interesting when you're dealing with that power level on Earth. And especially considering it's we've been at that level with the Eternals, and yet it's never been they've never been on the Avengers radar at all. And likewise, so
Yeah.
the Avengers haven't been on their radar, and they haven't been on the Avengers radar. And so it's going to be really interesting. Here's the thing that most excites me about this movie is the director, Chloe Zhao, or Zhao, I believe. Yeah, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I don't know if you've heard about Chloe Zhao, but right now she directed this movie called Nomadland, that got nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars. Apparently people really like this movie. At least the critics really like it. I don't know how many. I don't know that it was a box office smash because there haven't been any box office smashes with the pandemic.
Well,
but,
yeah.
But the critics really liked it.
That was the movie with Steven Yeun, right?
No, that was no. This was one with Frances McDormand. Stephen Yeun was Minari, I think.
Then what is this one about?
So essentially, here I'll pull it up here. Essentially, it stars Frances McDormand as a woman who leaves her hometown of Empire, Nevada, after her husband dies, and the soul industry closes down, to be houseless and travel around the United States. Hence the title Nomadland. She kind of lives as a nomad, I guess. A modern day nomad.
I have not even seen a trailer for this movie. I've heard nothing about this.
Yeah, it's a pretty small movie, but the critics love it, and it got nominated for an Oscar. I haven't seen it myself, but I've heard about it, and yeah, it's what's really exciting about it is here we go. Chloe Zhao has been winning a lot of awards for this film. So she won the let's see. So let's go to some of the bigger ones here. National Society of Film Critics Best Director. She won for that. She won for let's go to what's the next one? Satellite Awards Best Director. She won for that. There's a lot. Golden Globe Awards Best Director. She won for that. Yeah.
I mean, okay, if you win Best Director at the Oscars, then like you probably won all of these smaller ones too.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is that these are all the building blocks to get to that Oscar. So she won the Golden Globe. She won the Critics' Choice. Let's go down to the British Academy of Film Awards, Best Director. Let's see. And also, the Directors Guild. Literally the directors themselves, the Directors Guild, Outstanding Directorial Achievement. She won for this movie. Wow. And now, of course, she's nominated for the Oscar, which she's the runaway favorite to win for Best Director. So she did a really good job on Nomadland, apparently. And literally her next film after that's winning all these awards, is a massive Marvel movie. So that's really exciting.
It's very exciting. Is it going to translate? Because again, you're dealing with, a very grounded story versus cosmic whatever the heck.
And, fair point. I mean,
it's going to look great.
Yeah.
I know that. If she's doing this well, it's going to look amazing.
Yeah.
For me, like the big concern comes down to the writing.
Yes, and this is written by.
Write? And I'm if this is a movie that takes place over 7,000 years, I'm curious as to why not another Disney Plus show. where like each episode is, a chunk of time and you kind of build up to, the conflict in the present day.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, no, it's a very good point because yeah, I mean, of course, they're two very different things. Small drama film versus massive, comic book action film. Um, they're two very different things. But what you can have confidence in is that the person behind the camera's got some real talent for it.
Yes.
And is probably going to have a vision for it more so than, not to keep dunking on them, but the directors of Captain Marvel, for instance, who clearly did not have any kind of unique vision for what they wanted their movie to how they wanted to function or what they wanted it to look like.
Yeah.
That's just the first example that comes to mind.
Yeah, that was more like, they prioritized the message over everything else.
Yeah, if there was like a default Marvel filter that you could put over a movie, I think that's what it would have been.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing that does give me confidence. But the writers are Kaz Firpo and Ryan Firpo. So they're cousins. They're a screenwriting duo, and it seems like they don't have their filmography is literally two things. They did a documentary called Refuge, which was good, I guess. Apparently, it won Best Documentary at the Santa Barbara International Film Festival, and it played at South by Southwest. So, okay. And literally just that from 4 years ago, and now this massive Marvel film.
And they're writers.
Yes, they're
write a documentary.
I don't. But in fairness, I will say this. In fairness, if you look at a lot of the Marvel films, the people,
people a big chance.
Yeah, the screenwriters tend not to be like super well-known screenwriters. Unlike unless you're Guardians of the Galaxy, where the screenwriter is also the director, James Gunn. They tend not to be big name people. So I'll try not to hold that against them because that's pretty much par for the course. The Marvel screenwriters don't tend to be really big name people.
If you even have writers, I mean, the first Iron Man film was like 70% improvisation.
Yeah. And also, I mean, of course, it's not he's not very popular now, but also Joss Whedon directed and wrote The Avengers.
Yeah.
So unless you have that situation where the director is also the main writer, then they tend to be smaller name people. And so I'll try not to hold that against them. In fact, let me just for my own curiosity here. What would be a good example of? Would be a good example of this. Okay, here's a good example. So Thor Ragnarok. We all love Thor Ragnarok. Mm-hmm. Thor Ragnarok was written by Eric Pearson, Craig Kyle, and Christopher L. Yost. What have Eric Pearson, Christopher Kyle, and Craig Yost done? Well, let me just pick. Let's look at Eric Pearson first. He did some TV episodes, some uncredited rewrites. Chris Yost, he did Max Steel. Oh, he did Thor: The Dark World, which I don't know if that's the best example. I've never heard of Max Steel, but apparently that was a movie. And what about Craig Kyle? He did some direct-to-video stuff, some TV episodes, and yeah, he was a producer on the first two Thor movies. So, MCU. The point being, MCU writers tend not to be, the most heavily credited people coming in. Yeah. And that's okay because they still do a good job, or they are capable of doing a good job. So, so I try to hold that against it. But the director
Eternals is just going to be a wild card.
Then. It is. It is.
I just am unable to have any expectations until we see a trailer.
Yeah. No, it's we don't know what to make of it. What's weird is, and here's the other thing, is that originally, in the original kind of concept of what Phase 4 would be, Eternals was supposed to be the second movie, but as everything got reshuffled around because of the pandemic, it's now the third movie coming out in Phase 4. Originally, it was going to be Black Widow, Eternals, then I think it was actually going to go into Doctor Strange, and then Shang-Chi after that. And now it's Black Widow, then Shang-Chi, and now Eternals at number 3. So I think that tells us that maybe this film, because it's taking such a wide scope and it's kind of outside of the mainline events of the MCU, at least at the beginning, it was more flexible in being able to be moved around, because if the events of the Eternals were critical to the events of the very next movie, then they couldn't move it. They would have to keep it at number 2. But clearly, this one is a little bit more disconnected, so they can kind of make that shift and have it work out. As you said, it's a wild card. I think this is going to be, just as we were saying, Shang-Chi is going to be different. This is going to be really different. Like, I
don't know what this is going to be. Like, I have no idea what they're going to be drawing upon for inspiration. What the genre is going to be.
Yeah, but I'll say this.
We'll just have to wait and see, I guess.
Yeah, and also just one last thing on this is the cast for Eternals is incredible. You've got Angelina Jolie, Richard Madden, Kumail Nanjiani, Brian Tyree Henry, Salma Hayek, Kit Harington, Gemma Chan. I mean, these are some heavyweights. So I'm excited for that too. But anyway, yeah, as you said, we'll see. That's going to be really, really interesting and weird. And you know what? I'm here for it. So,
that's interesting and weird is what the MCU does best. So,
absolutely. So that was the trailer for Ghostbusters Afterlife, slated to release on November 11th. First of all, well, a few things. First of all, I just have to say that I love that trailer because I just get chills when we get that voiceover of Bill Murray's Venkman, when he's doing a call it fate, call it luck, call it karma, because it reminds you of what we love so much about Ghostbusters, and it's embracing the original Ghostbusters, not trying to take a shit on it like Ghostbusters 2016.
It isn't like a parody of Ghostbusters.
Exactly. It's not
a love letter to it.
Exactly. It's not mocking it. It's embracing it, and that's no coincidence because this is directed by Jason Reitman, who is of course Ivan Reitman's son, who directed the original ones. So this really is kind of like getting the band back together. Obviously, the main cast are now stepping back in favor of McKenna Grace and Finn Wolfhard. It's kind of making it more of a Stranger Things type thing, which is fine because God knows everyone else has tried to be Stranger Things by now, so Ghostbusters may as well. But you've got a lot of the brain trust coming back. Jason Reitman and Ivan Reitman is producing it, so he himself is still directly involved with it. Bill Murray coming back, Dan Aykroyd coming back, Ernie Hudson coming back, Sigourney Weaver coming back as Dana. I mean, it's great. It's
gonna be really cool.
Yeah, it's really and as you said, I mean, look, Finn Wolfhard is great. I mean, obviously, talk about Stranger Things reference, literally just taking the Stranger Things actor and bringing him over into this, but he's great. Paul Rudd is great. He's delightful in everything. So, I'll just read the premise here. After being evicted from their home, 2 children and their single mother are forced to move to a farm inherited from their late grandfather, located in Somerville, Oklahoma. When the town experiences a series of unexplained earthquakes, the children discover their families linked to the original Ghostbusters, who have become something of a myth, as many have long since forgotten the events of the Manhattan Cross Rip of 1984. They discover the secret legacy of their grandfather left behind. So, that's the that is the synopsis for this film, and again, very much Stranger Things, isn't it?
Yeah.
And they don't really they don't say this in the synopsis, and you don't see it in the cast listing, but it's been pretty widely speculated when that trailer came out 2 years ago now almost, that that the grandfather who left them this farm, and whose secret legacy they're talking about, is going to be Harold Ramis's character, Spengler, Spengler from the original.
Yeah.
Obviously, he himself couldn't be in the movie because he tragically passed away a couple years ago. But it seems like that's pretty heavily what they're implying, is that this was Spengler's farm essentially. That's why he still has the Ecto-1. He has all the equipment in that abandoned mine shaft, because he was the one that was always researching. He was the one that wasn't really, that was most into the science of it and wanted to learn more about the ghosts. So. And also just the way that McKenna Grace's character is, with the glasses and everything. They kind of look like Egon. So
Yeah.
so it makes sense. So so it's probably going to be Spengler's grandkids in this town in Oklahoma and on this farm. And yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting. And not to there's so much that you could say that that is criticism of the 2016 film, because there's a lot to criticize. But it's just so refreshing to get a soft reboot, because this has been all the rage. I mean, the soft reboot, we saw it with obviously Star Wars and Jurassic World, and so many of these franchises, and some do it successfully, some less so.
Yeah.
But this is a soft reboot that I think really knows how to both push the story forward and have new characters, but also really honor what came before, because that original Ghostbusters is so beloved. I mean, it is so beloved. And, instead of mocking it and downplaying it, embrace it. That history is fantastic, and still tell your story with new characters, but also, take advantage of the incredible goodwill that you have built up from the previous films by bringing in Bill Murray to come back, and Dan Aykroyd and Ernie Hudson, which it's not just about you being willing to bring them in, but also they were willing to come back. It wasn't just like in 2016 where they just gave him a ton of money and just said, please show up for 5 minutes and whatever. In this case, they said, they showed it to him because Ivan Reitman was involved, and so they're all old friends, and they read the script, and Bill Murray, famously fickle, he actually agreed to it, and he's a part of it. Whereas you could tell from 2016, he was literally just there for the paycheck. Yeah. So, so I'm really excited. There's not much more to say about it. I mean, obviously, I want to hear your thoughts, but I'm just excited to get a soft reboot that is bringing this world back, bringing these characters back, and is just really going to carry on the story of Ghostbusters. Because, I mean, obviously that original film, and even Ghostbusters 2 was had its moments. People. I mean, obviously, it's nowhere near as beloved as the first, but it wasn't like the worst comedy sequel ever.
Yeah.
But I mean, the original Ghostbusters is such a lightning in the bottle, just perfect time, perfect place, perfect people movie. And that movie has a special place in my heart, and I'm excited to spend more time in that world. So
yeah, I'm really looking forward to this movie, and part of the reason for that is just because it seems just like a fun, casual adventure film.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as heavy and dramatic as James Bond is going to be. It's not going to be as contextually important as any of the Marvel films. It's just going to be like, here's this thing that calls back to something you loved, and we hope you love this one too. And it's going to be a good time, and you can tell that just from the trailer.
Exactly.
It's not an investment to watch. It's just come on down for a good time, and have a little bit of nostalgia and a little bit of modern fun. And I really appreciate that. I think that's really cool. Like you said, it's not like Star Wars, where it's trying too hard to be a reboot of
a one-to-one
what came before.
Yeah.
I am really curious, because it seemed like the Manhattan setting was kind of important to the original Ghostbusters, and to go from Manhattan to Oklahoma is really, really weird. So I'm just curious as to why here. Why are they just coming up in Oklahoma now? Like,
And that's the thing is because you're right. I mean, Manhattan, that was such a big part of the original Ghostbusters. So why would Spengler, who was obsessed with researching ghosts, take himself 1,000 miles away to live on a farm in Oklahoma? My hypothesis is the reason he did it was because he discovered some kind of ley line or some weird paranormal
Ghost
activity.
portal, yeah.
Yeah, some weird like hellmouth or whatever it is in Oklahoma, and so he wanted to move closer to it to study it, and that's why he bought this farm. And he's got this abandoned mine shaft on his property or whatever it is. If I had to guess, that's what it is. That's why he went there in the first place. Um, and that's why you've got ghosts popping up there now because whatever he was studying before, it's now coming back out, and it's unleashing havoc on this small town. And also, it's a fun contrast because, of course, obviously you've got huge city setting, and now you've got ghosts in a rural setting, and so you can't just belt around in wheat fields in the Ecto-1 and do this weird stuff, and just careen down Main Street. And it's a different kind of thing, and again, kind of Stranger Things-esque. So I think that's fun. They're literally doing with this one what it did. But back when they rebooted that, if you remember back in 2017, it and not really.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, if you remember that it reboot from a few years ago, that was literally just Stranger Things too. And also once again with Finn Wolfhard. So they're doing the same thing here, and that's fine because people really liked that it reboot. So if they do the same thing here, then more power to you.
Yeah, well, I like that it's not just like, oh, we're doing Stranger Things again. It's because it does take place in modern day.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a nice blend of like, it's not just we're investigating the paranormal and it just so happened to be in a previous time period. This is like paranormal plus really old stuff, which I think has a different special charm to it.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I'm excited for this one. It's I think they're on the right track. I mean, of course, there's always the chance that they could fall on their face, but I think I think with this one, they've really got the right intentions behind it. It's not just cheap,
Yeah.
That's the thing is that in 2016, that wasn't even a cheap cash grab. It was an expensive cash grab. It fell on its face quite badly. So I think they've got the right people and the right minds behind this one. And I'm excited. I think that they're going in the right direction here.
Here's the thing. I think the reason that the 2016 one flopped is because it was a cash grab.
Mm-hmm.
They were just, let's make a movie, cash in on the brand of Ghostbusters, which is really well known. Let's cash in on progressivism and make it an all-female cast, and that's all they did.
Yeah.
Was this one is really putting love and care into the story, and obviously it's going to do well, and the plan is to make a lot of money off of it, but like you said, what was his name, Ivan Wright, who's like the son is this is clearly a passion project for him.
Yeah.
And it just makes it that much more special.
Exactly, and here's the thing, and not to make this a Ghostbusters 2016 discussion because we'll be here all day, but here's the thing is that as we've said before, an all-female Ghostbusters doesn't. I mean, that could work, and especially when you think about who they got. I mean, Melissa McCarthy, Kristen Wiig, Leslie Jones, Kate McKinnon. I mean, these are very funny people.
Amazing.
I mean, that's the thing is that you found 4 very funny people, very talented people, and no movie starring the 4 of them has any business being so unfunny. And I think the fact is just because you said, I mean, that movie wasn't born out of any. That's the thing is that movie didn't have any conviction for Ghostbusters. That movie was just, it had a conviction for, let's get these 4 big name talents together. we'll slap a recognizable IP that you love on it, and it'll still be, a lazy 80% improv that doesn't work cash grab, but you'll see it because it's Ghostbusters, and you love Ghostbusters. It had no passion for the source material. It was just, as you said, it was just, let's cash in on recognizable IP and, well-known stars. But it could have been so much better. And I think that's why so many people correctly, in my opinion, lay the blame at the feet of the director, Paul Feig, because ultimately that's what he did. When you read about how that set functioned, the script was almost irrelevant for so much of the actual dialogue of that movie. It was just improv and just throw whatever you want to say, throw it out there, and we'll cut it together in post and see what happens. And you could tell in the movie because so much of it just felt like lazy, like little half-baked SNL sketches. Essentially, how I would put it. They were like half-baked SNL sketches tied together that didn't work with the Ghostbusters veneer on top of it, and recipe for disaster. And that's what it was. So,
yeah. The worst part is I saw that one in theaters.
My
I paid money
condolences.
to see that one.
Yeah, my condolences on that. But yeah, also, this one last note. The cast, J.K. Simmons is in this movie. Now, we didn't see him in the trailer, but that's interesting because that's obviously,
Maybe
that's
the voice of some ghosts. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm fascinated to see how he fits into this because we didn't see anything about him in the trailer, but could he be the villain of the movie? Maybe what was that guy from Ghostbusters 2?
I don't know, but they it seems like they're gonna bring back the Marshmallow Puff Man.
Yeah, I saw
because
that.
in the second trailer or in the new trailer they released recently, they had like mini marshmallow puffs like jumping off of the packages in the grocery store.
Yeah, I
Paul
saw
Rudd
that
was like
clip.
freaking out about that.
Yeah, I saw that clip. Do you notice the name of the mine in the trailer? It was Shandor Mine, Shandor Mining, and Ivo Shandor was the architect of the building that was designed to be like a I guess
The firehouse.
no the skyscraper that was designed to be like a
Conductor.
conduit, I guess, between the supernatural world and our world.
Oh.
In the original.
Oh my God, that's gonna be so cool.
Yeah,
They put
exactly.
so much love into this new movie.
Yeah,
Oh my
exactly. And so,
God.
yeah, so essentially he was, yeah, so I see it here. So Shandor was the leader of a Gozer worshipping cult, and he designed the building to function as an antenna for attracting and concentrating spiritual energy to summon Gozer and bring about the end of the world. Um, and so that's why that building that Dana lives in, that apartment building at the end of Ghostbusters, that's why that it works. It worked in that way because it was designed to be like this beacon and this kind of gateway between the supernatural world and our world.
Yeah.
And so it stands to reason, this guy, we know he was a rich guy because he was, this multimillionaire developer in New York. And so maybe this was one of his mines. Maybe he owns mines as well. And he, the material that built that building was mined in Oklahoma. I don't know, but that is a connection. Maybe that could
Or
give us
just
a hint as to who
after the
J.K. Simmons.
building failed, like he started pursuing this
Yeah,
other thing in Oklahoma, and it wasn't just moving to Oklahoma to conduct further research and buy this farm. Maybe he was tracking him down, and
that's true.
I don't
Yeah.
know. It could be that. Just that little fact makes me even more excited for this film.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah, just an interesting little tidbit. But yeah, moving on. So next, we were expecting to talk about Mission Impossible 7, but ironically, just in the time between our last
It's
conversation and now, it
no
was pushed
longer
back.
this year.
Yeah, pushed back to 2022. So, well, I'm sure we'll talk about that at some point, or at least talk about Mission Impossible Fallout because that was, I think, one that we both really enjoyed. But yeah, got pushed back. So, alas, it's out of our hands. Um, So next up on December 10th, we have West Side Story, directed by Steven Spielberg. We do not have any trailer for this one, unfortunately, but I mean, it's West Side Story, so you know.
West Side Story, great. You know, it was a great musical, great movie. Mm-hmm. Why do we need to redo it? It was already done so well.
It's true. I mean, it's, you know, there's, yeah, it's true. You know, there's not. I don't think anyone's expecting a lot of new stuff to come out of, new material to come out of this. I think the best that it can hope for is just to be a really strong adaptation of the original film, and I think it can do that. I mean, obviously you've got Spielberg behind it, so that's you know that's an incredible boost that you can get for yourself. But yeah, you know, we've all seen the movie. We've you know, we're all familiar with the classic music and the dances from the original. I think it's, you know, I think that hopefully it's just a really strong musical, which
it's gonna do well. We all know it's gonna do well.
Definitely.
I just part of me hopes that they lean into the fact that it is an adaptation and maybe do a modern telling of it or just some kind of different telling of it. The chances of that happening, I feel like, are pretty slim. I think they're just gonna make it new and shiny and you know, and better visuals and you know better.
And probably. And I can see here, it's unfortunately it isn't modern. It's still going to be set in the 1950s.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I mean, it's just going to be like another Disney live action remake. Essentially, it's just.
Yeah. And honestly, yeah. I mean, just so long as it's faithful and you know they do a good job, just so long as this isn't a cat situation, we should be all right. Which I don't think.
Yeah. Honestly, I know Cats was really, really bad. Mm-hmm. I kind of want to watch it, have both of us watch it for an episode and talk about it down the line.
I'd up for that. Yeah, I haven't seen it. I
think we should save that, put it in the back of our minds, and just that could be really fun.
Yeah, that would be a good episode. Yeah, no, that would be a good episode.
Cats, so you don't have to.
Yeah. No, I think that would be a good episode because I haven't seen it. Of course, I know that it was pretty terrible. So. Yeah, I don't think this will be that, but yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, if it gets the job done, if it tells the story, you've got Spielberg behind it. You know, it feels like you can't screw this up proposition. So we'll see.
Yeah, it would be really hard to screw this up, I feel like.
Yeah. And in fairness, you know, the original came out in 1961, so it's been a 60-year gap. So I guess it's time for a remake.
That's fair. Yeah. I mean, in that perspective.
You know, as opposed to, you know, you've got, you know, Disney, they're literally adapting films that just came out 20 years ago. You know, they just did, what's the most recent one they did? I guess maybe it would have been Aladdin, would have been the most recent animated film that they've brought over.
I think Lion King was after Aladdin.
Okay, yeah, maybe Lion King. Yeah, Lion King was 98? I forget.
Yeah, they did Lion King. I think they're currently working on Jungle Book.
Oh, pardon me, 94. Okay, so, but still.
Yeah, it hasn't been long at all.
Yeah, but they're gonna do a Hercules, and that one was late 80s. So, I know I saw that.
They're gonna do a live action Hercules.
Yeah, live action one.
It's such a shame. We should also save this for the podcast and do another episode on it. But it's such a shame that they're just doing it live action instead of like a remastered animation, because the animation was so good. It was groundbreaking. It visually it's so stylized and fun, and they just kind of throw that out for realism, and it's why?
Yeah. No, yeah.
Why get rid of all that kind of magic that you once created just because you can recreate it in a computer?
It's so true. It's why indeed? Yeah, but Disney, they have
It'll give them money. So
Exactly. That's the thing is that their IP is literally a money printer. Like people have so much nostalgia for Lion King and Aladdin and The Jungle Book and all these other movies, Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty and all of them, that literally their nostalgia is just it's like working in a money factory. They can just print the stuff. I mean, it's it doesn't matter. Even though they've all pretty much universally been vastly inferior to their original animated counterparts. There's just so much nostalgia and so much goodwill for the originals. They'll gross over a billion easy, just because that's what they do. I mean, you loved The Lion King growing up, so how are you not going to see the live action adaptation?
yeah,
That's how they've kind of gotten away with it. I mean, they did Dumbo not too long ago. They're doing all of them. So
yeah. I mean, it's. I understand why they're so successful.
Mulan,
It's just it's
yeah,
like
that's what I was.
disrespectful to the art form of animation.
Yeah, that's the
Which
one I was thinking of was Mulan. That
oh
one,
yeah,
yeah,
that is the most recent one. Yeah,
yeah.
you're right. You're right. You're right.
So yeah, so there you go. Disney's making money.
Yeah. What else is new?
Yeah, and further breaking news. Uh, so yeah, so that's West Side Story. You had the original Kingsman: The Secret Service, which was outstanding. I mean, just
So
an
good.
all-around fantastic action film with some good comedy in there too. With some really good comedy in there. And you had a sequel which came out in 2017, Kingsman: The Golden Circle, which I've seen The Golden Circle. I don't know if you've seen that one.
I actually just saw it like last week.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so I saw it a couple of years ago, and well, suffice it to say, it was not as good as the original.
It wasn't terrible.
No, not
It
terrible.
had a lot going for it. It had a lot of potential that I feel like just wasn't quite met up. I
Mhm.
love the world building. The idea of the statesman,
Yeah,
kind of having that additional organization. That was really cool. Um, but the villain kind of generic. The whole plot line of just drugs are bad, but actually like they should be good.
yeah,
Kind of boring. And they just did nothing with the concept of the golden circle. They did
yeah,
not
yeah,
like it was just the Poppy would like put a little gold circle on you if you were one of her henchmen. And it's like it had nothing to do with the fact that like the Kingsman or the Statesman and both were their logos sat within a golden circle. I
yeah.
thought it was gonna go back to like the foundation of these things and like
The history of it, yeah,
it had so
absolutely.
much potential and
It didn't deliver on.
it didn't deliver. Plot
Yeah.
wise, it didn't deliver.
Yeah, I mean, there were some action scenes that were very cool. I loved Pedro Pascal with his electrical whip.
Yeah, yeah.
That was very cool. But yeah, the plot definitely kind of let the side down. Um, so yeah, I mean, yeah, just as you said, I mean, it was the Golden Circle had its moments, but it doesn't hold a candle to the original, which was just all around a complete package of just of kick-ass film. Really, it was a really fun, edgier seat action movie, and it had so much charm. The organization was so fascinating. Colin Firth, who knew Colin Firth would be this unbelievably cool action hero?
Yeah.
Like who would have guessed that? Like that's one of the last people you would have guessed. But he was amazing in that movie, and just following Eggsy's training, and I mean, it was just Mark Strong is fantastic. I mean, it's just great. And Samuel L. Jackson just hamming it up, having you could tell he was having a lot of
She's so much
fun
fun. Yeah,
playing that
everyone was.
villain. And just, and I mean, obviously, the church scene is, one of the best
Freebird, that
fight
was
scenes
so. Oh
of
my
the
god.
of the decade. And just, I mean, it's so silly. I mean, you have this frequency that makes people go crazy and super angry, and this just like the entire world becomes a mosh pit. It's fun. It's really fun. Um, and so yeah, we both love Kingsman: The Secret Service, and I think it's another situation where it's kind of like Venom, where they have had a few years to see what worked and what didn't with the previous film, and now they're kind of adjusting. Now, just as you said, we wanted to get more of that history in the Golden Circle. Well, this is literally just the history of the Kingsmen, and I'm so excited because it's what we've always wanted to see. It's playing to the strengths. You're not only is it historical, is it a World War I setting, which is already fascinating, but you have these larger than life characters like Rasputin, who's going to be a villain in the film, and I think that's just, he's like doing like this crazy like spinning thing. He's got a pointed Orthodox cross, and it's awesome. Ray Fiennes hanging off of a plane with a rudimentary parachute, and I'm really excited for it. I think that this is back to form, back to what made that first movie so special in a fascinating time period. In the trailer, they even went back to the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. It seemed like Ray Fiennes was there in that parade procession when the Archduke got blown up. So they're really going to tell the story from, I think, the beginning to, I guess the end, because we know that the Kingsmen are officially established after the war. So I think that's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, I have to say, Matthew Vaughn as a director is... his work is so much fun, and like his action choreography is so good. And you had the whole church scene in the first film, and like Golden Circle didn't quite live up to expectations, but like the good parts of it were those action scenes. If you talk about like, the fight scene with the cab at the very start of the film, where this fight is taking them all over this moving vehicle, and it's like, the way it was shot, the way the camera kind of follows these individual punches, and it moves with the action, and it's such a cool and engaging way. And I can't wait to see that in that kind of period piece environment. It's gonna be like it's gonna be a weird, you know what it is, I think it's gonna give some slight Jojo Rabbit vibes. It's like if Jojo Rabbit was an action film. Because you have that, like, it's obviously this is World War I, not World War II, but you have that period piece, but then you have like some modern music, because he's going to incorporate a really good soundtrack.
Yeah, definitely.
And you have like more modern humor, but it's set in like that historical. It's just gonna work, and it's gonna be really cool, and I'm really excited.
I'm really excited. I mean, it's you may know this about me. I mean, I think World War I is a really fascinating time period, so I'm always a little bit more interested in movies that kind of are set around then or are centered around that, because I think it's just a fascinating chapter in history. And you combine that setting in that time period with this plot, which I'll just read the synopsis for this. You kind of got this from the trailer, but essentially what they're saying is, as a collection of history's worst tyrants and criminal masterminds gathered to plot a war to wipe out millions, one man and his protege must race against time to stop them. So it seems like the antagonist of this film is going to be this shadowy group of people that is essentially that have orchestrated the war, as they say, to wipe out millions, presumably increase their own power. And this is the precursors to the Kingsmen fighting back against them. And I mean, there's just that's just fascinating, because of course there is a nugget of truth in that. I mean, you could easily argue that one of the main reasons that World War I happened was because you had this elite class of politicians and royals in the pre-war Europe that they all had such huge ambitions to imperial ambitions and continental ambitions, that they would have stopped at nothing to come out on top, essentially. And so there is a nugget of truth in that. And again, I think there's just a lot you could do with it. And also, I always found this to be quite fun. They got Tom Hollander to play George V, Wilhelm II, and Nicholas II. He's playing all three of them, just him, because they all look so similar, and they're all essentially related. So they're all just played by the same guy. And
that's so good.
I just find that really
that's
funny.
some like what was that movie? It was like Kind Hearts and Coronets bullshit.
Yeah.
That's so good. I love that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's going to be fantastic, as you said. I mean, Matthew Vaughn, he's got such a sense of style, and again, it's back to form, with what we loved with the Secret Service. So
yeah,
I'm excited for this, and I'm excited for the Kingsman 3 as well, because we know that there is going to be a sequel to the Golden Circle at some.
It was going to be a full trilogy. I think it's good that they're doing this, kind of so they can, like you said, see what worked, what didn't, get back to their roots, and then come back really strong for the third one.
Absolutely. So really excited for that. That's going to be a very fun Christmas release. Hopefully it sticks to that. So without further ado, we've all been waiting for this. You named it as your most anticipated film of the year. I also ultimately named it as my most anticipated film of the year.
Possibly because of some slight pressure from me, but
Well, no, I think we have the same values on this. So, without further ado, on December 17th, Spider-Man: No Way Home. This is the sequel, of course, to Spider-Man: Homecoming and Spider-Man: Far From Home, and there is a lot going on with this movie.
There are many rumors.
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot we can say about this. So first, do you want to kick us off here, because there's a lot you could say about this.
I mean, I'll just start with where Far From Home left us, which is, the world knows Peter Parker's identity. He's been outed as Spider-Man, and we don't know what's going to happen, but presumably he's made a lot of enemies, and he's going to have to deal with that.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to be a singular villain or if it's also going to be kind of a Sinister Six type of thing, because they did, the post-credit scene for Homecoming was, the Vulture talking to who we presume was the Scorpion.
Yeah, Matt Gargan.
Prison. Yeah. But obviously that hasn't developed at all. There's the whole question, is Mysterio still alive? Or was that video put together by his team? I think it would be cool if he was alive, because he's such a cool villain.
First let's just do a bit of a bit of housekeeping on Far From Home. I firmly believe, and I will stand up for my position here, that Mysterio is not dead. I am not at all convinced that Mysterio is dead at the end of Spider-Man: Far From Home. And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this. But of course, at the end of that film, Peter, he's got the glasses, and he asks, "Is this real?" He doesn't ask a more specific question like, is Mysterio, is he alive, or is Mysterio, he doesn't ask anything specific
Show me
about
his vitals,
exactly about his specific condition. He just asks, "Is this real?" And I think Edith was the glasses AI, and Edith says, "All illusions are down."
Yes.
Yeah, which tells us nothing. I mean, yes, all illusions are down, but that doesn't mean that Mysterio is dead. And his whole thing, his whole shtick, is in creating these incredible, misdirections, essentially, and these incredible, his whole thing is in tricking your senses, essentially. So even if all of his illusions are down, it doesn't mean that he doesn't have some other way of tricking you, especially considering this is someone who, as we saw, was always thinking 2-3 steps ahead. So I don't think that he didn't consider. I have a very hard time thinking that he didn't plan for, that he might be injured in some way, and that would be the end of it.
Just thinking about it, like, I think he has to be alive, because we saw that entire confrontation on the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
We saw all the words that were exchanged, and in the video, he's like, I have information on the identity of Spider-Man. He is Peter Parker. He never said that on the bridge.
That's true. Yeah.
He would have had to have said that
After
after
the
the
fact.
fact,
Yeah.
which means he 100% has to be alive.
That's a very good point. Yeah. So yeah, I'm
Unless they're gonna say it
convinced.
was deep faked, but like
eh,
I'm sure Jake Gyllenhaal would love to come back because he and
oh
Tom Holland
yeah.
had so much fun.
Yeah, and we would
So
love to have him back too because my
yeah,
God, that was just he
so
was
good. What a
perfect
good
as
choice for
Mysterio.
Mysterio.
Yeah, perfect for Mysterio.
Also a great
Um,
take on Mysterio.
oh
There was a
yeah,
lot of talk about how they're gonna do it. I know it's kind of a dual-edged sword because on one hand it's like we already had the whole Iron Man connection in the first one
mhm,
and it leaned into that, but at the same time it's such a good explanation for Mysterio's abilities.
yeah.
That I think that worked really well. Um, just kind of having that connection. Maybe if it was less about like, oh, who's going to be the next Iron Man.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm hoping that this next one will really be about Peter Parker, Spider-Man being his own hero instead of like I'm trying to be an Avenger or
Right.
I'm trying to live up to Iron Man's ordeals or like just be his own character and be his own hero. I think that's really what he needs.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And if I had to guess, you would probably get more of that because, of course, in Homecoming, they wanted to really make it clear that, hey, everybody, this is no longer separate. We are fully part of the MCU. And so
Yeah.
let's put,
Yeah, yeah.
an Avenger in there to really drive it home that this is an integrated universe. And then in Far From Home, obviously, we had just come out of Endgame. So it was like, emotions are still high, and they really wanted to play up the fact that, Tony Stark is gone now. And so who's going to pick up the mantle? But now we're separated from both of those things. And so, likewise, I hope they do focus more on Peter Parker. If I had to guess, they would, because
Yeah.
from what we know about this story, and we'll get into this a little bit, it's it's going to be very much unlike anything we've seen before, and I don't think it's going to be very Iron Man centric. So let's just talk about what this is, because it's looking like Spider-Man No Way Home is going to essentially it's looking like it's gonna blow up the rule book essentially. From what we've seen, this film is seeming like it's going to take us into the multiverse, essentially into the Spider Verse, if you will, because we have Alfred Molina coming back. This is confirmed as reprising his role from the original Spider-Man 2, and also Jamie Foxx coming back as reprising his role as Electro from the Amazing Spider-Man 2 in this film. So those were, of course, very much non-MCU properties now appearing in an MCU film. How does that going to work? Well, wouldn't you know it? Doctor Strange is here. Benedict Cumberbatch is also going to be in this film, and Doctor Strange, of course, is the master of the multiverse. He is the guy. He is. Anytime in the MCU you need a guide through the multiverse, that's when you bring in Doctor Strange. So this film is looking like it is going to explode the rule book, and we are going to be entering some kind of multiverse where these characters are coming in, and it may have already happened because, of course, we already saw this with J. Jonah Jameson coming back, J.K. Simmons from the original Spider-Man films and into the end credits sequence of Far From Home.
Yeah.
So it's seeming like we are now officially pulling characters from past non-MCU Spider-Man films into this MCU version of Spider-Man. And
But what I like what I like about what they did with J. Jonah Jameson though is that they weren't just like he's the exact same character. They adapted him to fit within the MCU.
yeah,
So now he's like, he's basically like an Alex Jones figure with the Daily Bugle is like an online podcast TV show. It's not a
yeah,
newspaper.
yeah.
And I'm hoping personally that that's what they do with, you know, Jamie Foxx's Electro and um
Alfred Molina.
Yeah, and just I don't know. I'll that's all I'm gonna say for now. And when we get to the big ticket item, I will give my thoughts on it. But
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's looking like, as you said, when we left off with Far From Home, Peter Parker has now been outed to the world as Spider-Man. Everybody knows, and clearly there are some people, there's a lot of people that probably have a bone to pick with Spider-Man, and they know exactly who he is now. So, what is he going to do? Where is he going to go? Clearly, as the title would suggest, No Way Home. He can't just go home.
yeah,
He's probably going to have to go on the run. Um, perhaps, most likely, if I had to guess, because when we last see him in Far From Home, he's in Times Square in front, or no, sorry, in front of Madison Square Garden, and so he
is
could take.
Tom Holland's Spider-Man going to disappear from the MCU and be stuck in the Sony universe, literally having no way home, and then they'll have access to that property again?
Maybe.
That's probably the
I
most
mean,
far out possibility, and I hope that doesn't happen. But
maybe, but I would say I think it's far more likely that they're bringing those characters into the MCU than sending Tom Holland out of it,
yeah,
because we know that in that peace deal that Sony did with Disney, it's not just this movie, but it's also another team up movie in the future that's going to feature Tom Holland Spider-Man. So he has to stay in the MCU for that other team up movie in the future.
oh, is this not his last film?
No, no,
Did they get him
yeah.
on another contract?
Yeah, so essentially, in the peace deal, it was one more MCU Spider-Man film and one more team-up film, and then I think at a later date they're already develop at a later date they agreed to develop a fourth Spider-Man film, a fourth MCU Spider-Man film. So
Because I thought the team up film was Endgame.
no, this was after Endgame. So another one in the future, which might
That is
be
good. That is good.
yeah yeah,
That
which
is good
might
for the
be Doctor
future.
Strange too. Yeah. And if I had to guess, it probably would be Doctor Strange too, because we have Doctor Strange in this one. And if I had to guess, at least in the beginning of the film, Spider-Man is probably going to want to go, of all the places he could go, we know Doctor Strange is in this film. Maybe he would go to the Sanctum Sanctorum. I mean, it's
Good.
not far at all. He's,
I mean,
he
if he
left, he
knows
left
where it
him.
is, though.
Yeah, I mean, that's in Midtown. And we last saw him in front of the garden, Madison Square Garden. So it's not far at all for him.
Yeah.
But of course, the question is, how do we get from there to where these characters are coming in from other universes that are now coming into this universe? And that's what we don't know. We've seen a few promotional images, of course, no trailers, or anything
We've
like
seen
that.
some leaked set photos too.
Yeah, leaked set photos. But yeah, that's what we know so far. It's going to be bringing these previous characters from previous, 10 years of previous Spider-Man in, and possibly even this has been the big rumor, not
Yep.
confirmed, but they would also be introducing the previous Spider-Man themselves into into this film. Of course, you've got Tobey Maguire and
Yep. Andrew
Andrew
Garfield.
Garfield. Yeah, Andrew Garfield. Yeah, which that would be crazy. But if we are doing a live action Spider Verse, which it seems like we're moving in that direction, that would make sense.
I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this. I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this, but I don't want a live action Spider Verse.
Mm.
Spider Verse was so good. It
Mm-hmm.
was 10 out of 10, perfect film. And part of that was because it was animated and what they were able to do using the medium. And I don't want to see that in live action. I don't want them to just do a Spider-Verse 2 with live action. Um, I think, the Raimi trilogy was the first two were good.
And
But
I
that's
did like the third. I really did like I really did like Spider-Man
from what
three.
I remember. The third was good too. But
Yeah.
that had its own place in culture, and that existed, and then time moved on, and then there's Amazing Spider-Man 2, which, arguably there wasn't enough time between those two to do Amazing Spider-Man and Amazing Spider-Man 2. And um but I just want to settle on one adaptation. And it seems like, Tom Holland is the favorite adaptation. And, if he keeps getting his contracts renewed, like, that's the version we can stick with for a very long time. But to muddy the waters with, these older versions, to me just feels a little unnecessary. And again, it leads to that audience confusion, and the MCU as a tapestry starts to get some frayed ends. And like the paint starts to peel, and it's just, I think it's really cool for them to open up the multiverse idea. I like the idea of Doctor Strange and Spider-Man teaming up. I know that was kind of a big thing that happened in the comics. Very cool. I'm kind of hoping they'll do what they did with Quicksilver and WandaVision. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen WandaVision, but we had the X-Men actor who played.
What was his name? Evan Peters.
Evan Peters. We had the Evan Peters Quicksilver come into the MCU kind of as an Easter egg. Just like a callback to what the X-Men were, but he wasn't like replacing Quicksilver in that way.
Ralph Boner, yeah.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people were hoping for that. I'm kind of glad that it was just an Easter egg, just because, it's, I don't know. I just don't want the MCU to get too convoluted, I guess is my big thing. And like tonally, all those different Spider-Man films were so different. Arguably, the Raimi ones would fit better with Tom Holland's than Amazing Spider-Man with Andrew Garfield, where that was a little more gritty, but they're just so different.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that it's I hear you. It's ambitious. It's really ambitious, and they could very easily screw it up. There's no doubt about that. I mean, there's definitely a way that this film could aim too high and be muddy as a result if they try to bring in too many things and don't explain it well enough. But I do have faith that they can pull it off and do it well because, yes, you have these two very, very big, very proud companies, Sony Pictures and, Disney and Marvel Studios. And, this is, for both of them, this is huge. Sony is obviously financing it, Marvel is producing it. And so, even though it's two companies, they still have to communicate, and they need to have one unified vision going into this. And I'm sure they've worked it out in a way where it can satisfy what Sony wants, which is obviously to bolster its own properties that are not necessarily MCU related and Tom Holland related, such as Venom, perhaps. I would not be surprised, especially with 2 months between them, if we got a connection there. And also, of course, obviously what the MCU wants to do with Spider-Man going forward, because he's a big part of their plans as well. So I'm sure that they've really got a plan for it. And, it's almost, the team is almost identical for this one as it was for the previous ones. You have John Watts directing and Chris McKenna and Eric Summers writing. They did a great job with Homecoming, a great job with Far From Home. And so if I trust anybody, I trust them to do a good job with it. And it's true, as you said, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, the animated film, was incredible. I mean, as you said, 10 out of 10. And I cheered when I saw it won Best Animated Feature because it so deserved it. It was unbelievably fantastic. And so, if they're going in some similar direction now in the live action universe, you're absolutely right. It could fall on its face, but I know that the studios have a plan. the people who did a great job on the previous two are back, and I know they have a plan. And I think it would be fun. I think there is definitely a way you can do it well. Especially when it comes to bringing in someone like Electro, because Jamie Foxx's Electro was not exactly beloved in Amazing Spider-Man 2. That whole film was middling, to put it mildly.
Yeah.
And so this is an opportunity to not only revisit a character, but maybe even redeem a character that wasn't exactly, the best version of themselves in the previous film. I mean, Alfred Molina, I mean, his Dr. Octopus from Spider-Man 2 obviously was phenomenal. So
Yeah.
He doesn't need any help. Cool. Yeah, but this could be a kind of rehabilitation as much as just a revisitation
and that's
for some
why,
of these characters.
That's why I'm hoping they do kind of that adaptation route like they did with J. Jonah Jameson.
Yeah.
Where it's like if they make an MCU version of it rather than just bring back the literal character from those previous movies.
And I hear you, but the reason I don't think they're going to do that is just for the same reason that you said. You don't want to get a situation where you're overly confusing people with sending them mixed messages. If you're going to bring back the same actors, people might get confused. Well, why am I seeing the same actor playing the same character, but it's not the same version of the character they were playing before? Why isn't it just the same character? If you're going to bring back those characters, and either bring back the characters but cast different people, or I think that with J. Jonah Jameson, you can get away with that because he's kind of on the periphery. That could be kind of like an Easter egg thing. But when you're bringing back major villains, it's going to be tough to say, well, it's the same actors playing the same characters, but they're different. People are going to have too much of a connection to the history to set that to one side, unless they're like comic book movie fanatics like us. So that's why I really think it's going to be the same characters that we've seen before now coming into the MCU. And so it's just a matter of how do you do that? And again, the key to everything is Doctor Strange. He's the one who makes it possible, as the kind of as Marvel's steward of the multiverse. And speaking of the next film, the team up film, I would bet you anything the team up film that was included in the Sony Disney peace deal was Doctor Strange 2, because what do you know about Doctor Strange 2? It's being directed by Sam Raimi now, the director of the original Spider-Man trilogy. And we know that film has grown and grown and grown in scope from what it was originally going to be, which is just a strictly Doctor Strange sequel to almost a kind of like, how Civil War was an Avengers film just without being called the Avengers?
Yeah.
It's going to be kind of like that. It's going to be the multiverse crisis, because we laid the seeds of it in WandaVision, and we'll talk about that soon.
Yeah.
But we saw in WandaVision we're getting a little bit of that multiverse crisis. I think Loki is going to build on that. This is going to build onto that. The Eternals could build onto that, to the point where it's looking like that film is going to come to a head, and that's what's going to bring us into the multiverse of madness, as they put it in the title. So I bet you anything that next Tom Holland appearance will be in Doctor Strange 2, because the two are connected here, and this is going to lead in almost directly into Doctor Strange 2. So
yeah, because I knew all I knew is that it was Doctor Strange plus Scarlet Witch initially, and there's a lot of talk about her too, because she's a nexus being, which means she exists in like all forms of the multiverse, and it can kind of transverse through them. Yeah, I don't know. It's gonna be interesting. I guess I don't know. It's weird because I'm just scared about how ambitious they're being, but at the same time, it's like, if you think back to every single ambitious thing that the MCU has ever done, they have yet to let us down.
Yeah.
I mean, part of it for me too is like, I think about my parents who, they've enjoyed all of the Marvel films, but every time we go see a new one, we kind of have to explain the history of everything that came before it. And if you start branching off into the multiverse and things like, for the younger people who keep up with it and are like super engaged by it, it's they're gonna have no problem following everything. But I think when you get to some of those older fans or some of those more casual fans, I just hope there's still room for them to enjoy it and comprehend what's happening.
Yeah, and yeah, I think it's true. This is going to be very ambitious, and I think this is really the thrust of Phase 4. We've had the Infinity Saga, and now I think we're moving into a kind of multiverse saga.
Yeah.
And it's true. There is a risk that again, if you don't really kind of walk people through it, then people could be left behind. But what has Marvel proven to us time and time again? No matter how ambitious they get, they always do a good job of bringing everybody along with them. I mean, no matter how ambitious something like Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is, it still doesn't hold a candle to how ambitious the Avengers was when it came out back in 2012. I mean,
Yeah.
that was revolutionary in its concept. I mean, you bring these separately established heroes. It's not like the X-Men where they team up, but that's just a movie. You have Captain America who had his own movie, Iron Man who was already well established with 2 movies, and Thor, and Hulk who had a previous movie with a different actor.
Yeah.
And bringing them all together in this team up, and how the hell are you going to make this cohesive when you have these 4 very different elements, and they knocked it out of the park. And so when you talk about ambition, I think most things that the MCU does tends to pale in comparison to how ambitious that was at the time.
Yeah.
And true. So and I'm convinced that they've made it work no matter how crazy things have gotten, and things have gotten crazy. They've always found a way to make it understandable, to kind of bring everybody along, keep the casual people engaged, while also obviously giving the major fans what they want. And I mean, even Endgame, you look at Endgame, I mean, that was a movie where we've got a time heist, and they're going to these different these different moments in the MCU, and they're stealing the Infinity Stones, and within the first 5 minutes we cut Thanos' head off, and it's all this different stuff. If you were a casual fan, maybe you would have been left behind if it wasn't written so well and they really explained, here's what's going on, here's what we're going to do, here's what this is, here's what that is.
Yeah.
I think we're going to have a similar situation here where you've got the brain trust of Marvel, Kevin Feige and Amy Pascal, and just everybody over there, who kind of oversee everything. They've got their plan, and I trust them, honestly. When Marvel drops the ball, then we will know that their perfect record is over. But they haven't done it yet. We're like 20-something movies in, 12 years in, 13 years in, and it hasn't happened yet. So, they haven't done anything to lose my trust that they can pull something like that off yet. And to that extent, I say more power to them, because I think that's just going to be fascinating. I mean, Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness is going to be insane, because Doctor Strange, and this is Doctor Strange is another one of those characters I love, because he just literally, like, the adventures he goes on are insane. Like, he's going into different dimensions, he's like fighting demons and opening portals to different places, and is on different planes of existence, and it's so meta and weird and just like craziness. And I think that's what this is gonna be. And not to mention, obviously, with what we saw in WandaVision, again, we'll get more into this at a later date, but, where we left off with WandaVision, it seems like we're going to see something that we haven't seen before, which is an Avenger now being set up as a villain.
Yeah,
and that's going to be fascinating. So I'm really excited, and you can't tell that story without this story. Spider-Man is going to be, I think, really the linchpin of everything.
Spider-Man might actually just be the straight man of the Marvel universe, if you think about it. Because crazy as things get, like he's just supposed to be a kid from Queens. So
exactly. And so I'm really excited from what we've seen this, and also, it's going to be it's set around Christmas time. It's going to be a holiday film. Obviously, it's coming out in December, so that's nice. It's going to be doing some really cool stuff, and
it'll be
I'm
fun no matter what.
yeah, no, definitely. So I'm excited to see what they can do with a live action Spider-Verse, and I think that yeah, when you consider the potential of this, I mean, it's huge. It really is. So go see this. Skip Morbius. Forget about that. Go see Spider-Man: No Way Home. That's where it's at.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I mean, well, I guess it's our officially endorsed top movie to see this year that's coming out.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
if you see nothing else, see Spider-Man. No
No,
way.
definitely. And we know that, I feel more confident about this release date than any of the other ones because we've seen that Sony, they are dead set. This movie is coming out December 2021. It has to, come hell or high water. It's so intertwined with the main action of the MCU. It has to come out in December 2021. And Sony, they know that's going to be their highest grossing picture of the year. So they want it to come out this year. So we know that I would bet any amount of money that sticks to its date in December. So yeah, look forward to it.
Yeah. Well, I think that wraps up our kind of reviews of everything that's going to be
2021,
coming
yeah.
out to the end of
Yeah.
2021. Um, and we're now 2 hours and 30 minutes into our 1 hour recording session, so we should probably wrap up. But
yeah, and thank you very much out there for listening to this mega episode. We always appreciate you entertaining our ramblings. And yes, hopefully we'll be able to successfully provide some insights as to what we're looking forward to this year.
yes, and just as a kind of fun announcement, we are officially picking the name Observation Conversations.
Yes.
This is a name that harkens back to, I guess, an inside joke we've had from middle
a
school
long
days.
time. Yeah, years and years ago.
Yeah, it was just I don't know how it started, but it was just this joke that was like observations with Jonathan.
Yeah, it was this imaginary show we came up with. It was just me pointing out the obvious, and with the tagline "Observations with Jago."
It was funny to us at the time as kids.
Yeah,
it doesn't sound that way saying it out loud, but
you had to be there. You had to be
yeah,
there.
yeah, but yeah. So we're picking the name Observation Conversations. Although we've primarily been talking about movies, this is a podcast where eventually we want to branch out into not just movies, but TV and video games and all forms of media and news and just kind of see where things go and make our observations, talk about it, and grow our audience as we go along. And I think it's going to be a fun journey.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm very excited. So yeah. So look out for us in our new home at Observation Conversations. We'll have a YouTube channel. We'll have an Instagram page. We'll have a Twitter page. And stay tuned for much more of this.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think this is where we end the episode. So
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, and we will talk soon.